Hey, what's up, guys? Eyes open in California here. I wanted to do a video on Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Because I was reading through Jasher, and there's not a lot of people who know very much about Sodom and Gomorrah. And I hear people all the time talking like they're giving what the canon says about Sodom and Gomorrah. But if you want to find out more detail, you have to go to the book of Jasher, right? And the book of Jasher, in case you don't know, is a book that all the Israelites were taught as children. It was like, I don't know what you'd call it, a grade school kind of book. It was a thing that the Israelites read. Baby Yeshua was taught the book of Jasher. Every Israelite was taught the book of Jasher, right? So, and it's even mentioned in the canon a few times. So, without further ado, I want to read chapter 18 and 19 out of the book of Jasher in its entirety. This video is going to be long, but stick around to the end. It's very informative, right? Because people are going around saying they know why Sodom and Gomorrah got smote. Well, they don't like really know the reason why, but I'm gonna show you right now. Okay, so I'm just gonna start reading. I have this page in black because I have done this so many times, and with the white screen in the background, it's just burning my eyes at this point. And I hope you don't mind the change. Okay, Book of Jasher, chapter 18. And Abraham rose and did all that God had ordered him. And he took the men of his household and those bought with his money, and he circumcised them as the Lord had commanded. Lord never commanded that. And there was not one left whom he did not circumcise. And Abraham and his son Ishmael were circumcised in the flesh of their foreskin. 13 years old was Ishmael when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And in the third day, Abraham went out of his tent and sat at the door to enjoy the heat of the sun during the pain of his flesh. And the Lord appeared to him in the plain of Mamre and sent three of his ministering angels to visit him. And he was sitting at the door of the tent, and he lifted his eyes and saw, and lo, three men were coming from a distance. And he rose up and ran to meet them, and he bowed down to them and brought them into his house. And he said to them, if now I have found favor in your sight, turn in and eat a morsel of bread. And he pressed them, and they turned in and he gave them water, and they washed their feet, and he placed them under a tree at the door of the tent. And Abraham ran and took a calf, tender and good, and he hastened to kill it, and gave it to his servant Eliezer to dress. And Abraham came to Sarah into the tent, and he said to her, Make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes to cover the pot containing the meat. And she did so. And Abraham hasted and brought before them butter and milk, beef and mutton, and gave it before them to eat before the flesh of the calf was sufficiently done, and they did eat. And when he had done eating, one of them said to him, I will return to thee according to the time of life, and Sarah thy wife shall have a son. Right? There ain't no way the angels ate the meat, by the way. And the men afterwards departed and went their ways to the places to which they were sent. And in those days all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah and of the whole 5 cities were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord, and they provoked the Lord with their abominations, and they strengthened in aging abominably and scornfully before the Lord, and their wickedness and crimes were in those days great before the Lord. And they had in their land a very extensive valley, about half a day's walk, and in it there were fountains of water and a great deal of herbage surrounding the water. And all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah went there 4 times in the year, with their wives and children, and all belonging to them, and they rejoiced there with timbrels and dances. Right? So in case you don't know where Sodom and Gomorrah are and the 5 cities they're talking about, it's right here. So here's the Mediterranean, here's Israel, right? Here's the Dead Sea, right? Here's the Dead Sea. See this landmass right here, right? This one here. This is like the land of Moab, right? So here's the Dead Sea, and you have Sodom, Gomorrah, um, Zoar, Admah, and Zeboim. So here's this image expanded. I'm going to go ahead and expand this a little bit, right? So here's the Dead Sea, right? And this is the southeastern portion of the Dead Sea. There's this little peninsula that sticks out right here. You have these cities, right? And there's mountains right here. So anybody who's coming from over here around the Dead Sea, they're funneled by the sea, by the Dead Sea, and by the mountains. They have to walk through these cities. Zeboim, Admah, Zoar, Gomorrah, and Sodom, right? As they start trucking through here, they have to pass these cities, and they're right up against the mountains on the east side of them. So that's geographically what it is. Okay. So let me read this part one more time. And all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah went there 4 times in the year with their wives and children and all belonging to them. And they rejoiced there with timbrels and dances. So 4 times a year, the people from these cities all met in a valley, about half a day's walk. And they all met there and basically had like a quarterly Lollapalooza or a quarterly Woodstock, right? And in the time of rejoicing, they would all rise and lay hold of their neighbors' wives, and some, the virgin daughters of their neighbors, and they enjoyed them. And each man saw his wife and daughter in the hand of his neighbor, and did not say a word. And they did so from morning to night. And they afterward returned home, each man to his house, and each woman to her tent. So they always did 4 times in a year. Okay, so the men lived in houses and their women lived in tents for some reason. Also, when a stranger came into their cities and brought goods which he had purchased with a view to dispose of them, the people of the cities would assemble, men, women, and children, young and old, and go to the man and take his goods by force, giving a little to each man until there was an end to all the goods of the owner which he had brought into the land. And if the owner of the goods quarreled with them, saying, "What is this work which you have done to me?" then they would approach to him one by one, and each would show him the little which he took, and taunted him, saying, "I only took that little which thou didst give me." And when he heard this from them all, he would arise and go from them in sorrow and bitterness of soul, when they would all arise and go after him and drive him out of the city with great noise and tumult. So as people were trying to get through that southeastern corner of the Dead Sea, they would get swarmed on by the people who live in these cities, right? And there was a man from the country of Elam who was leisurely going on the road, seated upon his ass, which carried a fine mantle of diverse colors, and the mantle was bound with the cord upon the ass. There was a guy coming down the road with a donkey, right? He's got provender and hay wrapped up in a multicolored blanket wrapped with the cord, right? And the man was on his journey, passing through the street of Sodom, when the sun set in the evening, and he remained there in order to abide during the night. But no one would let him into his house. And at that time there was in Sodom a wicked and mischievous man, one skillful to do evil, and his name was Hadad. And he lifted up his eyes and saw the traveler in the street of the city, and he came to him and said, "Whence comest thou, and whither dost thou go?" And the man said to him, "I am traveling from Hebron to Elam, where I belong. And as I passed, the sun set, and no one would suffer me to enter his house, though I had bread and water, and also straw and provender for my ass, and am short of nothing." And Hadad answered and said to him, all that thou shalt want shall be supplied by me. But in the street thou shalt not abide all night." And Hadad brought him to his house, and he took off the mantle from the ass with the cord, and brought them to his house. And he gave the ass straw and provender, whilst the traveler ate and drank in Hadad's house, and he abode there that night. And in the morning the traveler rose up to continue his journey, when Hadad said to him, Wait, comfort thy heart with the morsel of bread, and then go. And the man did so, and he remained with him, and they both ate and drank together during the day, when the man rose up to go. And Hadad said to him, Behold now, the day is declining. Thou hadst better remain all night, that thy heart may be comforted. And he pressed him so that he tarried there all night. And on the second day he rose up early to go away, when Hadad pressed him, saying, Comfort thy heart with the morsel of bread, and then go. And he remained and ate with him also the second day. And then the man rose up to continue his journey. And Hadad said to him, Behold, now the day is declining. Remain with me to comfort thy heart, and in the morning rise up and early and go thy way. And the man would not remain, but rose and saddled his ass. And whilst he was saddling his ass, the wife of Hadad said to her husband, Behold, this man has remained with us for 2 days, eating and drinking, and he has given us nothing. And now shall he go away from us without giving anything? And Hadad said to her, Be silent. And the man saddled his ass to go, and asked Hadad to give him the cord and mantle to tie it upon the ass. Right? He wanted his stuff back. And Hadad said to him, What sayest thou? And he said to him, That thou, my lord, shalt give me the cord and the mantle made with divers colors, which thou didst conceal with thee in thy house to take care of it? And Hadad answered the man, saying, This is the interpretation of thy dream. The cord which thou didst see means that thy life will be lengthened out like a cord. And having seen the mantle colored with all sorts of colors, means that thou shalt have a vineyard in which thou wilt plant trees of all fruits. And the traveler answered, saying, Not so, my lord, for I was awake when I gave thee the cord, and also a mantle woven with different colors, which thou didst take off the ass to put them by for me. And Hadad answered and said, Surely I have told thee the interpretation of thy dream, and it is a good dream, and this is the interpretation thereof. Now the sons of men give me 4 pieces of silver, which is my charge for interpreting dreams, and of thee only I require 3 pieces of silver. Right? So he's going to save him 25%, right? What a nice guy. And the man was provoked at the words of Hadad, and he cried bitterly, and he brought Hadad to Sirach, judge of Sodom. And the man laid his cause before Sirach the judge. And when Hadad replied, saying, It is not so, but thus the matter stands. And the judge said to the traveler, This man Hadad telleth thee truth, for he is famed in the cities, for the accurate interpretation of dreams. And the man cried at the word of the judge, and he said, Not so, my lord, for it was in the day that I gave him the cord and the mantle which was upon the ass, and in order to put them by in his house. And they both disputed before the judge, the one saying, Thus the matter was, and the other declaring otherwise. And Hadad said to the man, Give me 4 pieces of silver, that I charge for my interpretation of dreams. I will not make any allowance, and give me the expense of the 4 meals that thou didst eat in my house. And the man said to Hadad, Truly I will pay thee for what I ate in thy house. Only give me the cord and the mantle which thou didst conceal in thy house. And Hadad replied before the judge and said to the man, Did I not tell thee the interpretation of thy dream? The cord means that thy days shall be prolonged like a cord, and the mantle that thou wilt have a vineyard in which thou wilt plant all kinds of fruit trees. This is the proper interpretation of thy dream. Now give me the 4 pieces of silver that I require as a compensation, for I will make thee no allowance. And the man cried at the words of Hadad. And they both quarreled before the judge, and the judge gave orders to his servants, who drove them rashly from the house. And they went away quarreling from the judge. When the people of Sodom heard them, and they gazed about them, and they exclaimed against the stranger, and they drove him rashly from the city. And the man continued his journey upon his ass with bitterness of soul, lamenting and weeping. And whilst he was going along, he wept at what had happened to him in the corrupt city of Sodom. Right? So they're full of scammers, right? They have quarterly nasty parties, right? And they're scammers and robbers and thieves, right? Book of Jasher, chapter 19. And really, at the end of this is going to make so much sense. So please stick around. Book of Jasher, chapter 19. And the cities of Sodom had 4 judges to 4 cities, and these were their names: Sirach in the city of Sodom, Sharkad in Gomorrah, Zabnak in Admah, and Menon and Zeboim. And Eleazar, Abraham's servant, applied to them different names, and he converted Sirach to Shakra, Sharkad to Shakrura, Zebnak to Kizabim, and Menon to Matzladin. And by desire of their 4 judges, the people of Sodom and Gomorrah had beds erected in the streets of the cities. Right? And if a man came to these places, they laid hold of him and brought him to one of their beds, and by force made him to lie in them. And as he laid down, 3 men would stand at his head and 3 at his feet, and measure him by the length of the bed. And if the man was less than the bed, these 6 men would stretch him at each end. And when he cried out to them, they would not answer him. And if he was longer than the bed, they would draw together the 2 sides of the bed at each end until the man had reached the gates of death. So they would make like a taco out of the bed and squish him, right? And if he continued to cry out to them, they would answer him, saying, Thus shall it be done. Thus shall it be done to a man that cometh into our land, right? They didn't like nobody in their land. And when men heard all these things that the people of the cities of Sodom did, they refrained from coming there, right? This was absolutely not a tourist attraction. Nobody wanted to be there. Except Lot, for whatever reason. And when a poor man came to their land, they would give him silver and gold, and cause a proclamation in the whole land, in the whole city, not to give him a morsel of bread to eat. And if the stranger should remain there some days and die from hunger, not having been able to obtain a morsel of bread, then at his death all the people of the city would come and take their silver and gold which they had given to him. And those that could recognize the silver or gold which they had given him took it back. And at his death they also stripped him of his garments, and they would fight about them. And he that prevailed over his neighbor took them. Okay, so if somebody went into their land, right, everybody would walk up to them and greet them and give them gold coins and silver coins. And the people walking through there would be like, wow, this is the greatest day of my life. Look at all this money I just got, right? And they would stick around that whole area because of the money they got. And the sick joke was that the merchants in those cities were not allowed to sell anything to these people, to the strangers. So they had all this gold and silver, and they would say, hey, I want to buy some water. And they'd be like, nope, I can't sell you water. You're a stranger. And they're like, but here's some money. They're like, no, I can't sell it to you. It was like a sick joke. So people would stay there in that area because they had all this money, but they couldn't buy food or drink, and they would just kill over. That's how long they were there, right? That was their sick joke, right? Let's see, and those that, and I'm going to read this again, and those that could recognize the silver or gold which they had given him took it back. And at his death, they also stripped him of his garments, and they would fight about them. And he that prevailed over his neighbor took them. They would, after that, carry him and bury him under some of the shrubs in the deserts. So they did all the days to anyone that came to them and died in their land. Right? And in the course of time, Sarah sent Eleazar to Sodom to see Lot and inquire after his welfare. Right? Because she was worried about him, because this is where he's living. He's living with these people, right? And Eleazar went to Sodom, and he met a man of Sodom fighting with a stranger. And the man of Sodom stripped the poor man of all his clothes and went away. So Eleazar gets there to Sodom. The first thing he sees is a native Sodomite beating up a stranger and stripping him butt naked and sending him off along his way, while the guy from Sodom is making off with his clothes, right? And the poor man cried to Eleazar and supplicated his favor on account of what the man of Sodom had done to him. And he said to him, "Why dost thou act thus to the poor man who came to thy land?" And the man of Sodom answered Eleazar, saying, "Is this man thy brother? Or have the people of Sodom made thee a judge this day, that thou speakest about this man?" And Eleazar strove with the man of Sodom on account of the poor man. And when Eleazar approached to recover the poor man's clothes from the man of Sodom, he hastened and with a stone smote Eleazar in the forehead, right? And the blood flowed copiously from Eleazar's forehead. And when the man saw the blood, he caught hold of Eleazar, saying, "Give me my hire for having rid thee of this bad blood that was in thy forehead, for such is the custom and the law in our land." And Eleazar said to him, "Thou hast wounded me, and requireth me to pay thee thy hire?" And Eleazar would not hearken to the words of the man of Sodom. And the man laid hold of Eleazar and brought him to Shakra, the judge of Sodom, for judgment. And the man spoke to the judge, saying, "I beseech thee, my lord, thus has this man done, for I smote him with a stone, that the blood flowed from his forehead, and he is unwilling to give me my hire." And the judge said to Eleazar, "This man speaketh truth to thee. Give him his hire, for this is the custom in our land." And Eleazar heard the words of the judge, and he lifted up a stone and smote the judge. And the stone struck on his forehead, and the blood flowed copiously from the forehead of the judge. And Eleazar said, "If this then is the custom in your land, give thou unto this man what I should have given him. For this has been thy decision. Thou didst decree it." And Eleazar left the man of Sodom with the judge, and he went away. Right. So these guys, they literally sound satanic. I'm just gonna throw it out there. These are definitely the devil's children. Right. And when the kings of Elam had made war with the kings of Sodom, the kings of Elam captured all the property of Sodom, and they took Lot captive with his property. And when it was told to Abraham, he went and made war with the kings of Elam, and he recovered from their hands all the property of Lot as well as the property of Sodom. And at that time, the wife of Lot bare him a daughter, and he called her name Paltith, saying, "Because God hath delivered him and his whole household from the kings of Elam." And Paltith, daughter of Lot, grew up, and one of the men of Sodom took her for a wife. And a poor man came into the city to seek a maintenance, and he remained in the city some days. And all the people of Sodom caused a proclamation of their custom not to give this man a morsel of bread to eat until he dropped dead upon the earth. And they did so. And Paltith, the daughter of Lot, saw this man lying in the street, starved with hunger, and no one would give him anything to keep him alive. And he was just upon the point of death. And her soul was filled with pity on account of the man. And she fed him secretly with bread for many days, and the soul of this man was revived. For when she went forth to fetch water, she would put the bread in the water pitcher. And when she came to the place where the poor man was, she took the bread from the pitcher and gave it him to eat. So she did many days. And all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah wondered how this man could bear starvation for so many days. And they said to each other, "This can only be that he eats and drinks, for no man can bear starvation for so many days or live as this man has, without even his countenance changing." And 3 men concealed themselves in a place where the poor man was stationed, to know who it was that brought him bread to eat. And Paltith, daughter of Lot, went forth that day to fetch water, and she put bread into her pitcher of water, and she went to draw water by the poor man's place. And she took out the bread from the pitcher and gave it to the poor man, and he ate it. And the three men saw what Paltith did to the poor man, and they said to her, "It is thou then who has supported him, and therefore he has not starved, nor changed in appearance, nor died like the rest." And the three men went out of the place in which they were concealed, and they seized Paltith and the bread. They seized Paltith and the bread that was in the poor man's hands, which was in the poor man's hands. And they took Paltith and brought her before their judges, and they said to them, "Thus did she do, and it is she who supplied the poor man with bread. Therefore did he not die all this time. Now therefore declare to us the punishment due to this woman for having transgressed our law." And the people of Sodom and Gomorrah assembled and kindled a fire in the street of the city. And they took the woman and cast her into the fire, and she was burnt to ashes. And in the city of Admah, there was a woman to whom they did the like. For a traveler came into the city of Admah to abide there all night, with the intention of going home in the morning. And he sat opposite the door of the house of the young woman's father, to remain there, as the sun had set when he had reached that place. And the young woman saw him sitting by the door of the house. This is where it says when B. This is how it came. I did a copy and paste off of the book of Jasher. I just copied and pasted it. So this is what was on the electronic PDF. Okay, so the young man saw him sitting by the door of the house. And he asked her for a drink of water, and she said to him, "Who art thou?" And he said to her, "I was this day going on the road, and reached here when the sun set. So I will abide here all night, and in the morning I will arise early and continue by my journey." And the young woman went into the house and fetched the man bread and water to eat and drink. And this affair became known to the people of Admah, and they assembled and brought the young woman before the judges, that they should judge her for this act. And the judges said, "The judgment of death must pass upon this woman, because she transgressed our law. And this therefore is the decision concerning her." And the people of those cities assembled and brought out the young woman and anointed her with honey from head to foot, as the judge had decreed. And they placed her before a swarm of bees, which were then in their hives. And the bees flew upon her and stung her, that her whole body was swelled. And the young woman cried out on account of the bees, but no one took notice of her or pitied her. And her cries ascended to heaven. And the Lord was provoked at this, and at all the works of the cities of Sodom, for they had abundance of food, and had tranquility amongst them, and still would not sustain the poor and the needy. And in those days their evil doings and sins became great before the Lord. And the Lord sent for two of the angels that had come to Abraham's house to destroy Sodom and its cities. Right? So here's a screenshot that I got from the NBC series called The Bible. And they also did another series called AD, right? And I'm telling you, they did a wonderful job with these two series about biblical times. I mean, a fantastic job. If you haven't seen it, check it out. NBC did it, right? Okay. And the angels rose up from the door of Abraham's tent after they had eaten and drunk, and they reached, so right here, they are looking off of a mountain over the Dead Sea at Sodom and Gomorrah, right? So this right here would be the east side of the Dead Sea. This would be the west side, and over here would be south, right? Okay. And the angels rose up from the door of Abraham's tent after they had eaten and drunk, and they reached Sodom in the evening. And Lot was then sitting in the gate of Sodom. And when he saw them, he arose to meet them, and he bowed down to the ground. And he pressed them greatly, and brought them into his house. And he gave them victuals, which they ate, and they abode all night in his house. And the angels said to Lot, "Arise, Go forth from this place, thou and all belonging to thee, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of this city, for the Lord will destroy this place. And the angels laid hold upon the hand of Lot, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hands of his children, and all belonging to him. And they brought him forth and set him without the cities. Basically, they escorted him outside the cities. That's what set him without the cities means. And they said to Lot, escape for thy life. And he fled, and all belonging to him. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah and upon all these cities brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew these cities, all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities, and that which grew upon the ground. And Ado, the wife of Lot, looked back to see the destruction of the cities, for her compassion was moved on account of her daughters who remained in Sodom, for they did not go with her. Right? So here's a picture of it. This is what was raining down, right? And when she looked back, she became a pillar of salt. And it is yet in that place unto this day. It really is. It literally is. You can watch videos on it, right? And the oxen which stood in that place daily licked up the salt to the extremities of their feet. And in the morning it would spring forth afresh. And they again licked it up unto this day. And Lot and two of his daughters that remained with him fled and escaped to the cave Adullam, and they remained there for some time. And Abraham rose up early in the morning to see what had been done to the cities of Sodom. And he looked and beheld the smoke of the city going up like the smoke of a furnace. And Lot and his two daughters remained in the cave. And they made their father drink wine, and they lay with him. For they said, there was no man upon earth that could raise up seed from them. For they thought that the whole earth was destroyed. And they both lay with their father, and they conceived and bare sons. And the firstborn called the name of her son Moab, saying, from my father did I conceive him. He is the father of the Moabites unto this day. Right? And the younger also called her son Benamai. He is the father of the children of Ammon unto this day. Right? So the grandchildren of Lot are the Moabites and the Ammonites. And after this, Lot and his two daughters went away from there, and he dwelt on the other side of the Jordan with his two daughters and their sons. And the sons of Lot grew up. And they went and took themselves wives from the land of Canaan, and they begat children and were fruitful and multiplied. Okay. So a little bit about this, right? I watched a video where this dude went to Sodom and Gomorrah, and he checked it out, and so this brimstone that rained down on them was so hot, right, that it turned certain things into like a black substance, almost like nuked. Like it was like nuked, right? It was like nuked. And then the strangest thing is that the soil around these areas, you know, the shale soil and the sand and the rock and the dirt and all this stuff, this brimstone turned a lot of that area into powder. It turned rock into powder because the dude on this video walked up to a hill and he reached his hand out and he touched it like this and was able to dig his arm into this hill, and it was like powdered sugar. Like whatever this was, whatever this brimstone was, whatever this weaponry was, this was this weapon would not be allowed in the state of California. I'm just making a joke, but you get what I'm saying. Like this stuff was bad news. You did not want this to rain down on you. This stuff was bad news, right? And it literally turned the shale and the rock and the sand and the dirt into powdered sugar. Like you literally, if that guy stood there like this doing this to the mountain, he probably could have cut the whole mountain away. That's what it did. It literally did that. Now, he didn't exactly have a Geiger counter with him. I would have checked it for isotopes or radioactivity, but whatever. So this is what happened. So this is what Sodom and Gomorrah, and you know what? Don't look at the screen for a second. Let me scroll up faster, because this stuff, right, this always hurts my eyes to do this. So back to the geography, right? Here's the Dead Sea. So Sodom is right here on this peninsula, and then Gomorrah, then Zoar, then Admah, then Zeboim, right? So anybody who was trying, any kind of vendor who was trying to sell goods over here on this side, because of the mountains and the geography, they were trapped between the Dead Sea and the mountains. They had to pass through these cities. These cities, they're basically like land pirates. If you went through there, they were going to jack you, right? And that's what they were doing. They were starving people to death with their sick game of giving people money and then not selling them water and food with the same money that they gave them. They weren't allowed to do business. It's a sick game. These people were sick in the head. They had strange customs. They were smoting each other in the foreheads with rocks to make the blood come out. By all means, this is a very, very satanic kind of culture that was going on there. Now throw in the Lollapalooza, the no holds barred version of whatever, Woodstock, if you will, but it was a no holds barred version where people were with your wives and your kids, and you were with their wives and their kids. That's what the sexual immorality was, right? That was the largest display of ill that you could reach. I mean, think about it. All the inhabitants of all these cities went and hung out and did this 4 times a year, right? So it wasn't as simple as somebody just saying it's because they were homosexual. That is just the anyways, I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to share something else, right? I want to explain this real quick. So you know what? There you go. Okay, so these are pictures that I took off of a previous video that I did called "The Wrath of God Explained." So I want to explain this brimstone and what hit Sodom and Gomorrah and Admah and those places, right? So when you're keeping the commandments, God keeps a protective field around you, right? Because if God be with you, who can be against you, right? God be for you, who can be against you? There's something on my screen. So anyways, so everybody has this personal little force field around you, right? And because of your willingness to walk righteously, or walking as righteously as you possibly can, God puts a protective field around you, right? And when your city is righteous, when everything is righteous, that field covers your whole city, to include underneath, right? Because the enemy attacks from underneath, right? So there's a force field of protection, right? But the minute you start sinning, and there's nothing against Jessica Biel, everybody loves Jessica Biel. So when you start sinning, then God has to remove God's protection off of you, right? Because you're sinning, you're not doing righteously. Therefore, why would God have to protect you, right? Because the prince of this world is Satan. I don't know if you got the memo. This world literally belongs to Satan, right? It's his rules that are written. Anyways, that's a different video for a different day. So whatever. So once the protection of God's hand is lifted off of you, then the alarms start going off, right? Shield status compromised, right? It's USS Enterprise. The shield status is compromised. Then you're like this little baby lamb out in the open, and the evil one is like, all right, finally, right? So now he targets you. the wrath comes from Satan. God is love, man. There's no darkness in God. There is no darkness. There's no jealousy. There's no wrath. None of that is God. God is love, right? Peace, love, and happiness. That's God, right? But when you're not behaving in peace, love, and happiness, God has to remove the protective hand off of you. And then the wrath comes from this dude, right? Then he takes aim because your shields are down. So he's like ramming speed, right? So he's quick to fire everything at you, including the kitchen sink, right? He gets you from land, he gets you from air, he gets you from sea. That's what he does, right? So this was explained to me in detail in a dream, right? So what's written, you know, not everything written is true, and not all truth is written, right? That's why the Holy Spirit is here, teaching everybody, right? Holy Spirit, our Heavenly Mother, she has been here for 2,000 years, teaching men all things. Don't think that the only truth in this world is written. It's not. She teaches you the truth, right? So this is what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah, right? And it basically was the equivalent of that. They got nuked. What happened to that land is still there to this day. It powderized everything. Like it just turned it into powdered sugar. Like imagine that weapon, right? That's the indignation, right? So getting back to Sodom and Gomorrah, right? People say, oh, Sodom and Gomorrah got destroyed because of homosexuality. Really? Because God gave Moses 10 commandments, right? And here's the 10 commandments. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any engraven image, like any false idols. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Honor thy father and thy mother. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Thou shalt not covet. And this is the 11th commandment given by Yeshua in the book of John, chapter 13, verse 34. Right? And he basically told them, a new commandment I give you, that ye love one another as I have loved you, that ye also love one another, right? And the person who brought that out and highlighted that to me, you can't see it down there, but his YouTube name is 11th Commandment Disciple of Jesus. And the 11th Commandment Disciple of Jesus brought this to my attention. And you know what? 11th Commandment, you're right. So these are the 10 commandments. Which commandment, so in the canon it says, most people say, oh, Sodom and Gomorrah got destroyed because of homosexuality, right? Well, that's not exactly written here in the 10 commandments. These were the only 10 rules that Moses was given. He wasn't given any more rules than this. Now, he took it upon himself to break these 10 commandments and write 613 laws of Moses. That's what he did. But these are the 10 rules that God gave Moses, right? So none of these have anything to do with sexual orientation. If God didn't write it with the finger on stone, then it really probably wasn't that big of a deal to God, right? But what was Sodom and Gomorrah doing? They were killing, right? Did they have engraved images? It didn't go into it, but you can kind of do the math. Let's see, honor thy father and mother. Well, they're honoring something at those quarterly meetings. Thou shalt not kill. Okay, they violated that. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Oh, they definitely committed adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Oh, they definitely stole. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Well, that's exactly what those people were doing. Thou shalt not covet. Oh, they were coveting everything from everybody. Were they loving each other? Absolutely not, right? That is why Sodom and Gomorrah got smote. Make no mistake about it. These 10 commandments have nothing to do with sexual orientation. I'm just throwing that out there, right? So now let me stop sharing that and let me go to something else. Let's find out what the Son of God had to say about these things, right? This is, hopefully you're still with me. And And these are going to make so much more sense now, right? So Matthew 22, verse 35. Then one of them, which was a lawyer, asked him a question, tempting him and saying, Master, which is the great commandment in the law? Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it, Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, which the inhabitants of those 5 coastal cities along the Dead Sea did not, right? So there's that. Now let's go to Luke chapter 10. After these things, the Lord appointed other 70 also, and sent them 2 and 2 before his face into every city and place whither he himself would come. Whither he himself would come, right? So he sent them, right? He sent them 2 and 2. Therefore said he unto them, The harvest truly is great, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest, that he would send forth laborers into his harvest. That he would send forth laborers. The Lord of the harvest, Yeshua HaMashiach, would send these people. He sent them, right? Go your ways. Behold, I send you forth as lambs among wolves. Carry neither purse, nor scrip, nor shoes, and salute no man by the way. And into whatsoever house ye enter, first say, Peace be to this house. And if the Son of Peace be there, your peace shall rest upon it. If not, it shall not turn to you again. And in the same house remain, eating and drinking such things as they give, for the laborer is worthy of his hire. Go not from house to house. Who goes from house to house? He's going directly against the commandments of Yeshua. Or they are going directly against Luke chapter 10, verse 7. Go not from house to house. Right? And into whatsoever city ye enter, and they receive you, eat such things as are set before you. There's another book that says, unless it is dead flesh, can't eat meat. And heal the sick that are therein, and say unto them, the kingdom of God is come nigh unto you. But in whatsoever city ye enter, and they receive you not, go your ways out into the street of the same, and say, even the very dust of your city, which cleaveth on us, we do wipe off against you. Notwithstanding, be ye sure of this, that the kingdom of God is come nigh unto you. But I say unto you, that it shall be more tolerable in that day for Sodom than for that city. Right? Because Sodom did not welcome people into their house. Right? Okay. So that's Luke 10, verses 1 through 12. I've done this so many times. I have it written right here now. This is like take 10. Okay, so now I'm going to go down to Luke chapter 10, verse 25. This is where it's going to start to make sense. And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tempted him, saying, Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? And he said unto him, What is written in the law? How readest thou? And he answered, saying, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy strength, and with all thy mind, and thy neighbor as thyself. And he said unto him, Thou hast answered right. This do, and thou shalt live. But he, willing to justify himself, said unto Jesus, And who is my neighbor? And Jesus answering said, A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiment, and wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. And by chance there came down a certain priest that way, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. And likewise a Levite, when he was at the place, came and looked on him, and passed by on the other side. When a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was. Oh, I'm sorry. I got to reread this. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was. And when he saw him, he had compassion on him. And he went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And on the morrow, when he departed, he took out 2 pence, and gave them to the host, and said unto him, Take care of him, and whatsoever thou spendest more, when I come again, I will repay thee. Now which of these 3, thinkest thou, was neighbor unto him that fell among the thieves? And he said, He that showed mercy on him. Then said Jesus unto him, Go, and do thou likewise. Right? That right there was a good neighbor. Somebody who took in a stranger, took him in, took care of him, nursed him back to health. And that's what a good neighbor does. Is that what Sodom and Gomorrah were doing? Mm-mm. They were doing the opposite. They were bad neighbors, right? So now let's go to this last one, and then I'll wrap it up. Luke chapter 16, verses 19 through 31. Okay. And there was a certain rich man, which was clothed in purple and fine linen, and fared sumptuously every day. And there was a certain beggar named Lazarus, which was laid at his gate, full of sores, and desiring to be fed with the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked his sores. And it came to pass that the beggar died, and was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died, and was buried. And in hell, in English it's hell, but there's 3 different Gehenna, right? There's 3 different words for hell in Greek. And okay, so anyways, and in hell, or maybe that was Hebrew, I don't know. I've looked at this so long, I'm like seeing double now. And in hell, he lifted up his eyes, being in torments, and seeth Abraham afar off, and Lazarus in his bosom. And he cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus, that he may dip the tip of his finger in water, and cool my tongue, for I am tormented in this flame. But Abraham said, Son, remember that thou in thy lifetime receiveth thy good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things. But now he is comforted, and thou art tormented. And beside all this, between us and you, there is a great gulf fixed. There's like a great chasm, a great divide, right? It's actually the bottomless pit. So that they which would pass from hence to you cannot, neither can they pass to us that would come from thence. Then he said, I pray thee therefore, Father, that thou wouldest send him to my father's house. For I have 5 brethren, that he may testify unto them, lest they also come into this place of torment. Abraham saith unto him, They have Moses and the prophets, let them hear them. And he said, Nay, Father Abraham, but if one went unto them from the dead, they will repent. And he said unto him, If they hear not Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded, though one rose from the dead. Right? So here's a man who was laying at the gates of a prosperous man, and he did not lift a finger to help him. The dogs went over there. And killed him, licked him, and then he died, right? So here's the point of all of this, right? Sodom and Gomorrah were not turned into powdered sugar because of homosexuality. That's not why they were turned into powdered sugar. They were turned into powdered sugar for a multitude of transgressions against the Lord, right? And I'll even go one step farther, right? I happen to be straight, right? I judge nobody for their lifestyle, and neither should you, right? Because James 4:12 told you, you have but one lawgiver. Who art thou who judges another, right? And I'm misparaphrasing that horribly, but go read it for yourself. James 4:12, right? That's what it says. Don't judge nobody, right? And I'm going to tell you the reason why. Because here in California, there's a lot of diversity. We have different ethnicities. We have different We have different everything. It is a mishmash of everybody, right? And here's the one thing that I can tell you, that some of the absolute best people that I have ever met in my life live an alternative lifestyle, what it's called, right? They're in same-sex marriages. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to be flat out honest with you. I assure you, they measure up way higher than a lot of people out there. They do. I know people that would give you the shirt off their back if you needed it worse than them, right? They would give it to you. Would you? Would you take in a stranger? What I'm trying to say is, don't be so close-minded saying Sodom and Gomorrah got destroyed based on homosexuality, right? It makes you sound like a bigot. It's actually like a very, very, very ugly thing for people to hear. You're closing up, you're shutting up people's ears to hearing the truth. The truth of the matter is the 10 Commandments said no such thing. It wasn't that big of a deal to God Almighty. What was a big deal to God Almighty is that you loved God and that you loved your neighbor as you loved yourself. That was the biggest deal to Almighty God. So people, please, I implore you, stop saying this. Stop quoting the little tiny bit of the canon that goes into what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah. I just read to you the book of Jasher, chapter 18 and 19. I just read to you Matthew, chapter 22, verses 35 through 40. I read to you Luke, chapter 10, verses 1 through 12, and also Luke, chapter 10, verses 25 through 37, and Luke, chapter 16, verses 19 through 31. Sodom and Gomorrah got destroyed because they were bad neighbors, right? Now the creeper parties that they were having quarterly, that's a whole different story. I'm talking about people in monogamous relationships being faithful to the one that they love, raising a family, raising a nice family, I might add, well-mannered. They are good neighbors. People, stop, just stop. Sodom and Gomorrah didn't love God with all their heart, and they didn't love their neighbors, they loved themselves. Because I tell you what, I know a lot of people that live in same-sex marriages, and I assure you, they love God way more than you do. So God bless you. Thank you for sticking around as long as you did, and have a good one.